Hey, welcome back to Anti-Social Studies. I'm Emily Glankler. Today I'm going to give you an intro into Unit 4, Transoceanic Interconnections. It sounds so fancy. Just to be clear, we are still talking about the same time period. We have not moved on in time from Unit 3. We're talking about 1450 to 1750. But whereas Unit 3, we were focused a lot more on the states individually, kind of we looked at them separately, like how are states conquering places, how are states administering their empires. Today, we're going to also look at a lot more how they interacted with each other. So in a lot of ways, we're just kind of repeating what we did between Unit 1 and 2, but now with this new era in history. So I drew up this very simple little chart to kind of explain where we are in history. We are here. What has essentially happened is that land-based empires have been the source of power for a long time, and they still are. They're still very powerful. But there is a new type of massive empire that is on the rise during this time period, which are sea-based empires. It's going to start with Portugal. They're going to have like trading posts all around the world. It's going to eventually get passed on to Spain and the Dutch and England and so on and so forth. And so we are really kind of at this moment, these 250 years or so, or 300 years of history are at this moment in time where sea-based powers are on the rise. Land-based powers aren't really declining that much, but they're kind of starting to be passed by, or they're being caught up with by sea-based empires. And the question really is like, who's paying attention and who's not? And we're going to really see who was paying attention in the next unit to see who gets conquered and basically who does not. So that's essentially what we're looking at. Is there's these now two different types of competing states. And the question is, we kind of know that these European sea-based empires are going to become like the empires of the future. They're going to be the ones who like dominate the age of imperialism in the next era. But they're not there yet, right? There's still a ton of value in having these older, traditional, massive land-based empires. Okay, so let's just look at a map of where we're talking about, right? We're talking about, hey, the New World is included in this massive map now. So obviously we're going to have the discovery of the New World. And so setting up mostly the Spanish Americas, but obviously the British, the French, the Dutch, the Portuguese all set up colonies there as well. We still are going to have powerful trading kingdoms in Africa, although they are shifting to trading enslaved people more and more than they are trading gold and salt and so on and so forth. We're also still going to have powerful Asian empires. They are new. They've kind of risen out of the ashes of the Mongol conquests. And we talked about them individually in Unit 3, but now what we're really going to be asking ourselves is like, how is this new global economy impacting them? For some, it's going to be a really positive thing, like the Ming in China for a while. For others, it's not going to be quite as good. Russia is a thing now, which is very exciting. And Europe is starting to look a lot more like Europe does today. We have a lot of like very unified and consolidated kingdoms, especially in Western Europe. Eastern Europe is still mostly under the control of the Ottomans, and like Russia's creeping in there, as they always do. So the guiding question for this unit is, how did the discovery of the Americas change the global balance of power? And in true annoying historian fashion, like, or did it not? Did the global balance of power not really actually change during this time period? There's an argument to be made for either one. So hello, complexity. All right, the little sub-questions that you probably want to be focusing on as you're reading your book and as you're watching Heimler or whatever are, how do trade and labor systems change and stay the same? So we're going to continue using a lot of forms of coerced labor that we've used in the past: indentured servitude, slavery, serfdom, whatever. But a lot of those systems are growing exponentially and are morphing. The best example, or really the worst example of this, is going to be chattel slavery in the Americas. So we have had, slave labor for basically as long as we've had civilization, but that the scale of the enslaved people that are being forcefully moved to new continents, and then the fact that they are now identified as legal property and not like individuals, is going to be new, right? And especially this development that's going to happen in the British colonies, which states that the offspring or children of enslaved people also are enslaved. So what we're seeing is that forms of coerced labor that have been used throughout history are now starting to grow and spread to new places around the world, as obviously states and empires grow and spread to new places around the world. The second question is going to be, how was state power challenged? So it's important to acknowledge that just because we have these expanding land and sea-based empires, the Ottomans are going out and conquering places, Russia is starting to expand, Spain is expanding in the New World, that doesn't mean the people that they're conquering cease to exist. They still exist, and they're still resisting often being conquered. Sometimes you're going to see political resistance. You're going to see some really awesome like African queens who are negotiating with the Portuguese and other people to kind of maintain power. You're going to see indigenous people like King Metacom in colonial New England just violently resisting. You're going to see people in Russia, like peasants and Cossacks and stuff in Russia, resisting against Catherine the Great. But you're also going to see cultural resistance. So especially in the Spanish New World, we see this with Latin American Catholicism. So pay attention when you read about what we know as cultural syncretism, right? Where you maybe have an outside religion like Christianity that's coming into what we know of today as Latin America, but it's like changing and mixing with the indigenous forms of belief and expression to create something a little bit new. That's called syncretism, and it's something that historians get really excited to see because it's just a great illustrative example of like cultural diffusion and of kind of resistance from the people up to those in power. Okay. The other question you'll want to know is what's changing or staying the same about social hierarchies. So one of the trends and the themes of this time period is the rise of new elites. Because the way of the world is changing. We can think especially about Europe. In Europe, under the feudal system, power was land. You knew who was powerful because they were literally nobility. They were labeled as powerful from birth, and they controlled a lot of land. But what's been happening since the late Middle Ages, and now is going to escalate a ton with the conquest and settlement of the New World, is you have this rising class of people, especially in Europe, who maybe don't own a lot of land. They're definitely not nobility, and they don't own a lot of land in Europe, and yet they're becoming powerful and they're becoming influential and they have a lot of money. This is known in like England as the burgher class. In France, it's gonna be known as the bourgeoisie. It's this rising middle class where like a lot of people in the older nobility, serf, feudal system don't really know where to place them. That's happening kind of all around the world. So as the world is changing and as the global economy is starting to change, and it's not just about who controls the most land, whether that's on a state level or individually. Now it's also about controlling trade. Being a merchant can be really valuable. Having just a lot of gold and silver can be really valuable. All of that is changing, and governments and also individuals are having to figure out where they fit in this new system or emerging system, right? The depiction in the middle is of the first stock exchange. This is in Amsterdam, right? So you have people that can just sort of invest in exploration, and they can use their money to make more money without necessarily buying any land. You have the very literal creation of new social hierarchies in Latin America with the casta system. You're going to have kind of growing resistance to aristocracy back in Europe. Over to the right is the marriage of Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. No, don't go in the basement, right? They're going to chop your heads off, but we'll get to them in the next time period. Okay, so a lot of stuff is changing. But again, I want to just re-emphasize that, like, also there are a lot of things staying the same. These Asian empires are still incredibly powerful, right? The land-based trade routes that the Mongols sort of revived are still going to be very important. And really, the whole point is that Europe is doing all the things it's doing, trying to explore, eventually conquering the New World. All of it is just to get on equal footing with the Indian Ocean traders. It's still the Indian Ocean trade. That's where it's at. That's where they want to be. They want to be trading and influential with India and China and Southeast Asia and East Africa and the Middle East. And so really, for the longest time, they actually don't see a ton of value in the Americas as like land itself. They just see it as valuable as a way to gain something that maybe these Asian empires will want, right? So just to be clear, it's not like in 1492, Europe all of a sudden like wins world history. There's going to be a long period of time where they are trying to still use what they've discovered to compete with the traditional land-based empires that have been powerful and innovative and kind of crushing it for a really long time. So that is what we're looking at in this unit. Again, just keep thinking about this silly little chart that I drew. We're in this moment where they're crossing paths and everyone's trying to like rearrange themselves and figure out how they fit into this new world. Some people, like the Marie Antoinettes or Louis XVI, sort of stick their head in the sand. China does that to some extent as well. Others kind of look around and start to realize that things are changing. I'm talking about Catherine the Great of Russia, that sort of thing. So just be paying attention to those themes and developments as you go through Unit 4. Thank you for joining me. As a quick plug, I just want to mention, if you like the videos that I'm making, here are some different ways that you can support me at Anti-Social Studies. To be clear, me at Anti-Social Studies is literally just me. I'm in my guest room right now doing this alone. So you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. Please do that. You can follow me on Instagram at Anti-Social Studies. And if you really like what I'm doing, then you can join my Patreon community at patreon.com/antisocialstudies. Thanks.